can pause the recording for now.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Just a heads up, I don't think this computer I'm using has Teams on it. Are you guys chatting on Teams at all?
I'll text you if then we need anything.
Okay. I guess I'll have Mateus team people if we need our grouping something.
Hi, folks. We're just going to give it another a minute or two here before we get started. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. I think we're going to go ahead and get started on the meeting. So welcome to the second of two community meetings for this third workshop series. The first community was on Monday, August 16th from 6:30 to 9:30. We're sharing the same information at both meetings. Before we get started, I just wanted to play the video for those needing Spanish interpretation. Next slide, please.
Hola y bienvenidos a esta reunión. Para acceder a la función de interpretación, haga clic en el icono del globo en la parte inferior de la ventana de Zoom y selecciona el idioma que desea. Para escuchar claramente el audio de interpretación, le recomendamos que también seleccione la opción para silenciar el audio original, que es la opción más baja en el menú después de hacer clic en el icono del globo.
Thank you. Okay, so my name is Tracy and I'm the planning project manager for this village effort. Briefly going over the agenda, I will be providing an overview and refresher of what a village plan is, how the concept came to be and what it does, and a recap of some of the work that we've already completed. Then I'll be presenting the draft village plan where I'll cover land use, maximum heights, urban design, parks, open space, circulation, streetscape, and rezonings. Next, we're going to be placing participants into breakout rooms for a small group discussion to talk about the draft village plan and further discuss the diagrams and information that I will be presenting. And then lastly, we're going to come back to the main room and then I'll cover what's to come. Next slide, please. Okay, onto the overview. So the village concept was created as part of the general plan. The general plan can be thought of as like sort of a high level policy document that guides how the city will grow in the next 19 years or so until the year 2040. The city council, or in other words, your elected officials approved or adopted the general plan in 2011. One of those ways in which how the city will grow is actually this village concept. The village concept is the idea that certain parts of the city are going to be transformed by private development and private investment in areas that are easily walkable, have multimodal transportation options, and will incorporate additional housing and jobs. The village plans are policy documents that set forth the rules for private development to abide by. So the village plan itself doesn't construct anything, there's no like groundbreaking, but rather sets the rules that will need to be followed by those private developments. Next slide, please. Okay, so to recap some of the work that has been done so far, we did host the first workshop in June of 2019. We had a community meeting to understand what the assets and opportunities were within the village area. Assets can be thought of as like places, buildings, environments that are prized within the community. And then opportunities are areas of improvement or change. These assets and opportunities were used to create the vision for the village. And the village is the overarching concept for the community's preferred future for development within the North First Street area. The guiding principles you see on your screen implement the vision. And this information is already posted on our North First Street or North First Village webpage on the city site. Next slide, please. At the second workshop, which we hosted on October 21st, 2019, we had a community meeting with the community to establish character areas. Character areas are more of places that have a distinct feel based upon the type of development and intensities allowed within that area. So based on the feedback we received, 3 character areas were crafted in which you see on your screen, which is also available on our North First Village website. Next slide, please. So this is just a visual representation of where these character areas are within the village. So there's 3. We have the commercial gateway character area to the northern part of the village, just south of 880 there. We have the central civic center character area sort of in the middle or the heart of the village. And then at the end, we have the southern mixed use character area, and that's towards like Hensley Street. Next slide, please. Okay, now let's talk about what the village plan will do. The village plan will set rules in which private development will be required to follow. They'll also provide information to the public, the elected officials, and private developers on what the community's vision is for the area and what the community desires are. When an application for redevelopment of private property that is located within the village boundary is submitted to the city, city staff will be looking at this village plan to ensure that the private development will comply with the village plan. Based on the city council policy for outreach, there will be separate community outreach efforts when applicants or applications are filed for redevelopment or development of private property. The only time where excuse me, the only time where additional public outreach is not required is when a project is coming in under certain state laws, such as Senate Bill 35. The Kelsey project located at the intersection of North First Street and Fox Avenue came in as an SB 35 project, where state law exempted the project from a community outreach process. Private developers that are submitting projects under state law can still do their own outreach process, but the city cannot require it. The Kelsey project had one community meeting, but that was before the application was converted to the SB 35 application. The city does very strongly recommend that projects submitting under state law still conduct their own community meeting and outreach, but we just can't require it. Next slide, please. Okay, now let's talk about what the village plan does not do. So the village plan does not require or force property owners to sell their property, nor does it require that the property owners redevelop their property. The village plan affects redevelopment of property, so what is existing, so what's there now can remain. Next slide, please. Okay, so now let's get to the meat of the meeting. So through this village planning process, the village boundary can change. So property shown within the village boundary will be required to comply with the rules contained within the village plan if there is redevelopment or development of land. Properties outside of the village boundary will not be required to comply with the rules contained in the village plan. So the blue line that you sort of see on the map indicates the current village boundary, and then the pink color you see on the map, or the pink line you see on the map, indicates the proposed village boundary. So you'll notice we're making some boundary changes. You'll notice that there's a handful of properties being removed from the village boundary, particularly on like the southern and middle sections of the village area. Properties were generally removed from the village boundary if they were historically sensitive. So that's like if they're located on the city's historic resources inventory, are a designated city landmark, or considered a candidate city landmark. Also, if the property is a single family home currently used as a single family home, or if the property has been recently developed, or if the property, it's a property that we don't expect any development activity to occur. Next slide, please. Okay, so now we're going to be talking about land use. Next slide. So what you see on the screen is the proposed land use map. The land use diagram, excuse me. The land use diagram does two things. One, it says what can and can't be built where, and two, it determines how large these buildings can be. So as part of this village plan, there are 5 land use designations proposed, which you can see on the lower left-hand side of the screen. Generally, the pink and purple colors are for 100% commercial designations, so like no residential is allowed at these locations. The sort of brown colors you see are the residential designations that do also allow for commercial. And the yellow color, it's maybe a bit hard to tell, but the yellow color at the corner of North First Street and George Street is an existing single family home that we want to remain as is. So it's designated residential neighborhood. We are requiring certain properties to provide ground floor commercial when it's redeveloped. So this could be like, so ground floor commercial could be like a coffee shop, a dry cleaners, daycare, offices, that sort of thing. We also have the open spaces shown on this map as well. There is a preferred park location to the northern part of the village, and a series of publicly accessible but privately owned and maintained open spaces. We also do have a pedestrian and bicycle paseo proposed in Ashbury and Miller Street there. The land use designations also relate to the character areas that we covered in workshop 2. At workshop 2, we heard a lot of folks say that they wanted the taller buildings on the west side of North First Street, generally sort of in that central area of the village. And so this land use diagram does reflect that because we've placed the transit residential and urban village commercial designations towards the center, and those are the more intense designations. Next slide, please. So this is a bullet list of what is allowed in each land use designation. So you'll see that neighborhood community commercial allows for neighborhood serving uses like coffee shops, offices, restaurants, that sort of thing. Properties with this land use designation are generally located on the northern part of the village, on the east side of North First and towards the south end of the village. There's like 2 properties on the south end of the village with this designation. The urban village commercial designation is a commercial only designation, but it is more intense than the neighborhood community commercial designation. Properties with this designation are located in the center of the village on the west side of North First. And then lastly, I might have mentioned the last slide, but there is one residential neighborhood designated property, and it's the existing single family home that's on the corner of George Street and North First Street. That is a candidate city landmark. Next slide, please. The urban residential land use designation allows for medium density residential development and some commercial uses. Properties with this land use designation are generally located in the north and south ends of the village area. The transit residential designation allows for high density housing and commercial development. So this is a more intense land use designation, which is why properties with this designation are generally located in that center of the village on the west side of North First Street. Next slide, please. Okay, so now we're going to be talking about the height diagram. Next slide. So as part of this village effort, we are proposing to change the maximum allowed heights for properties within the village boundary. On the left-hand side of the screen, you'll see what are the heights that are currently allowed by the San Jose Municipal Code. So they range from 120 feet to 200 feet. The orange color on the map are the areas that allow for 200 feet. Sort of burnt salmon color to the bottom there allows for 120 feet in height. And then the light dusty pink color allows for 150 feet in height. On the right side, you'll see what is being proposed as part of the village plan. And you'll notice that the height is either staying the same or being lowered for the most part. There is a pocket of properties between Heading and Mission where the height is proposed to be increased. I do want to note here that other requirements in the village plan, like step backs where buildings would be required to step their building back from the street and adjacent properties, may reduce the height of the buildings because you are losing square footage there. The San Jose Municipal Code also does require private open space and common open space to be provided as all these components. They will slowly sort of chip away at the building envelope. So due to all these other requirements, the building heights may not be the building heights you see on the screen because all these different requirements that the city has will slowly chip away at the building. Next slide, please. So this is just an example of building massing that has been cut away due to other requirements like that the city has, like the open space, the private open space, common open space, setbacks, things like that. Just for context, this is the area that's generally located at the Taylor and North First Street intersection. Next slide, please. Okay, so now we're going to be talking about urban design and placemaking. Next slide. So one of the items that was mentioned at the first and second workshops is the desire to create a sense of place, like you've arrived somewhere. So to accomplish this, we're proposing gateway elements to be at these general locations you see on the screen. So that's like North San Pedro and West Taylor Street, Taylor and First Street, Heading and First Street, and then Heading and like a little north of Burton, right after the 880 overpass. These gateway elements can be things like signage, landscaping, something to sort of help signal that you've entered an area. At the upper right-hand corner of the screen, there's just a picture of a gateway element in the Shasta-Hampton neighborhood that's located off the Alameda. There's a sign that announces the neighborhood and then some enhanced landscaping there in the median. Also shown in the slide is the preferred park and publicly accessible but privately maintained and owned open spaces. These open spaces are generally located at the heart of the village, and the preferred park is located in the northern area of the village. The city can't designate private land for public uses like parks, so it's notated here as a preferred park. Next slide, please. At the first and second workshops, it was mentioned by the community that the area had such a rich diversity of architectural styles. And it was further noted that the community wished to see these architectural styles in new development. The North First Street Plan does contain a standard in which buildings would be required to design and contain architectural styles that are currently within the village. This is just a very small sampling of the type of architecture found in this area. Next slide, please. Okay, now we're going to be talking about parks and open space. Next slide. So this map shows the parks and open spaces within proximity of the village boundary. So shown here is the Guadalupe River Park, St. James Park, Bethesda Park, and then Raymond Burnell Jr. Memorial Park. There is an identified need for additional parkland in this village. To provide open spaces within the village, the publicly accessible but privately owned and maintained plazas, and pedestrian and bicycle paseos at Ashbury and Miller are proposed sort of at the center of the village. Next slide, please. This is a close-up aerial view of the potential pedestrian bicycle paseo. You'll notice different paving materials, trees, perhaps some seating in the paseo. I do want to make it clear, though, that this is a potential pedestrian and bicycle paseo. Next slide, please. Okay, so now we're going to be talking about circulation and streetscape. Next slide. Thank you. As part of the village plan, there are limited transportation improvements, mostly because the Department of Transportation has other policy documents that accomplish the same goal. But through the community outreach process, we have heard a list of transportation improvements that the community would like to see. The city would need to study these further before implementing them, but the village plan will sort of house these action items for the city to consider in the future. So shown on the screen, this is just the northern section of the village, just south of 880 there, where the city would need to study the feasibility of adding more crosswalks and removing the northbound and southbound left turn lanes at heading to prioritize light rail, since it's along a light rail corridor. We'll talk more about this diagram and other transportation improvements during the small group discussion. Next slide. So this is the center of the village, sort of the between Heading and Taylor Street on North First Street, where the city should consider at a future time new pedestrian crossings, curb extensions to reduce the crossing time, and mid-block crossings to improve the pedestrian connection to transit. Next slide. And this is the south end of the village, generally from Jackson Street to Hensley Street, where the city could consider in the future working with VTA to implement pedestrian fencing to discourage unsafe crossings to and from the VTA light rail station there. Next slide. Lastly, the village plan is proposing to expand the sidewalks within the village area itself. So along North First Street, 20-foot sidewalks are being proposed, and that's inclusive of a 5-foot tree well for a street tree. The other streets in the village boundary are proposed as 15-foot sidewalks, and that's also inclusive of a 5-foot tree well. Next slide. So as part of a separate effort, the city will be rezoning property within the village due to changes in state law, specifically Senate Bill 1333. The Senate bill requires that the zoning districts align with the general plan. I'll speak more about the differences between zoning and general plan on the next slide. But zoning can be thought of as like the set of rules that apply to the property. Zoning is separate, but it is related to this village plan. The city zoning code has rules related to like setbacks, allowed uses, things of that nature. The village plan is more conceptual and at a higher level than the zoning ordinance. Next slide, please. So what you see on the slide are the differences between the general plan designation and the zoning district. You'll notice that the general plan and zoning district control different things. So the general plan provides for allowed uses, densities, floor area ratios, or FAR for short, and it has policies and guidelines. The zoning district does provide for setbacks, height requirements, parking standards, and permit requirements. One quick note that I do want to make at the bottom of the screen there, of the slide there, that the village plan sometimes can control setbacks and height. Some of them do. But for North First specifically, it will not be controlling setbacks, but it will be controlling height. Next slide, please. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and break up participants into small group discussions so we can discuss the concepts that I went over in my presentation further. So when you get a notification on your screen to join a breakout room, go ahead and accept that notification, and you'll be moved to a smaller room for a small group discussion. Hi, everyone. Thank you for your participation in the small group discussion. We're just back in the main room now, where I'm going to be doing next steps and closing statements. Next slide, please. Okay, so for the next steps, after today's workshop, staff will be considering community feedback, and we will be available for a virtual drop-in office hour. These office hours won't have like a formal agenda like we were doing today, but it'll be an opportunity for you to virtually sit down with myself and ask some questions about the North First Street plan. The office hours that we have scheduled, the first one will be on Wednesday, August 25th from 2:30 to 4 p.m. And the second one is on Tuesday, August, oh, I'm sorry, did I say, I meant Wednesday, August 25th, 2:30, 4:30, and then Tuesday, August 31st from 3:30 to 5. The Zoom information, like the Zoom links, is already posted on the North First Street page that you see sort of on the bottom of the screen there. We will be taking the village plan to the Planning Commission for a recommendation in the fall of this year, and then moving forward to City Council for a decision in winter of 2022. We will be posting the draft village plan in full, so it will include the land use diagrams, the height diagrams that you saw today on the website sometime in the next 2 weeks, and I will be sending out an email blast of when it is live on our website. If you wanted to make sure you're on the email list for these sort of emails, feel free to drop me an email in which you can request to be added to list, or if you just want me to check if you're added to list, I'm happy to do that. Next slide, please. So my contact information is on the screen. I have my email address and I have my phone number there. And so if you wanted to, again, if you wanted to provide feedback or you have concerns or if you had questions, feel free to contact me via email or via phone call, whatever is convenient for you. If you wanted to make sure you're on the email blast list, you can send me an email or you can call me to make sure you're on there. If you do have questions about the rezoning effort that the city is undertaking through a separate effort due to changes in state law, SB 1333 specifically, you can contact Justin Daniels. His contact information is on the screen there, both his email address and his phone number. Next slide. So I just wanted to say thank you to everyone coming to today's meeting and participating. I was dropping into the breakout rooms. It sounds like there was some pretty good discussion and really good feedback. So I definitely do want to thank all the participants, the note takers, and the facilitators for spending their Saturday morning talking about this North First Street effort. So thank you again. And I hope everyone has a good rest of your weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, we're all back in the main breakout room. Next slide, please. Okay, so thank you everyone for participating in the small group discussions. It sounded like it went really well. I spent some time in the breakout rooms. And it sounded like the discussion was really good and we received some really good feedback. So for what is to come next, so after today's workshop, we will be considering community feedback and we will be available for virtual drop-in office hours. These office hours are not going to have like a formal agenda like we did today, but it'll be an opportunity for you to virtually sit down with myself and ask questions about the North First Village Plan. The 2 office hours we have scheduled, the first one will occur on Wednesday, August 25th from 2:30 to 4 p.m. And the second one will occur on Tuesday, August 31st from 3:30 to 5 p.m. The Zoom links for these 2 drop-in office hours are already available on the North First Street page, and the link is just at the bottom of the slide there. We will be taking this village plan to the Planning Commission for recommendation in the fall of this year. And we will be moving the plan forward to the City Council for a decision in the winter of 2022. We will be posting the draft village plan, including like the land use diagrams, the height diagrams, things like that on the website sometime in the next week or 2. And we'll be sending out an email blast of when it's live. So if you're not sure you're on those email blasts to receive this kind of information in your inbox, Jennifer, if you don't mind going to the next slide. You can contact me here. So my email address and my phone number is there. So if you just wanted to check if you're on the email blast or if you wanted to request to be added to the email blast, just shoot me an email and I can add you to those email blasts. You can also call me if you have any questions or concerns or feedback on the North First Village Plan. A little bit earlier in the main presentation, we did talk about the rezoning effort that will be conducted by a separate city team in our planning division. And so if you have questions on the rezonings that will be happening due to changes in state law, specifically Senate Bill 1333, you can contact Justin Daniels. His contact information is on the screen there. So his email address and also his phone number. Next slide. So just wanted to say thanks again for coming to today's meeting and participating in the small group discussion. I do appreciate you guys spending your Saturday morning with us to talk about the North First Village effort. So thank you a lot. I do also want to take this opportunity to thank the note takers and the facilitators and the meeting logistics people for helping with this meeting, as it does take a fair bit of staff to run these sort of meetings. So I just wanted to thank both the participants, the facilitators, the note takers, and the meeting logistics people for helping with this meeting. And I hope everyone has a good rest of your weekend. And thanks for joining.
Thank you.
Thank you.